Hello, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, good night, wherever you are. And this is your friend, your host, Dharam Singh. And I have a very beautiful person today with me, very smart, intelligent person, and one of the best person, I should not say one of the best person in Hitachi, but in her home at least. But she's great. So the best part is she is a PGMP and she done really well in her PGMP, and she agreed to come here to talk about share her experience, and that's why she's here today. Ren, how are you today?
Not bad, not bad. Trying to keep cool. Yes, I'm in Toronto, Canada, and it's not as hot as it's been. It certainly is not as hot as it's been in England, but nope, we're keeping cool and just trying to enjoy the summer for the brief amount of time that we get it over here.
Definitely, definitely. So look, not much further delay. I'd like to introduce Ren, and as she mentioned, she's in Canada, Toronto, and she's coming from vast experience, currently working for Hitachi Vantara as
Yes,
a senior project manager.
yes.
Yeah, and you coming with lots of like 15 year plus year experience and working uh, as a project manager, program manager in a small to complex environment with lots of budget. So the best part is you are a PGMP and you got it in the shortest time, in a shorter time.
Yeah, I did. I did. Although, admittedly, I don't know if the first time I was supposed to go write it during the pandemic, there were some challenges with trying to write it. So then rescheduling it, because of course, limited space, I
Mm.
wrote it back in April. So, you go in, you're ready, and then the pandemic hits and it's kind of like things are on hold. And then you go to write it again, and it's kind of like, oh my God, I hope I still remember everything that I studied. But yeah, I'm glad it's over. Honestly, I am glad. Like anybody who takes an exam is certainly my certification exam. Happy that it's over.
Exactly. So look, I was very happy when you sent me message that I passed my exam. I'm very thrilled about this. And along with you, I have now 410 PGMPs. And in this year already, I think 40 of them, including you. Last year I got 50 something, 50 plus, 52, 53. And that was full year. And this is July. We are not finished in July. I already have 40%, so 40 people. So I'm
Yeah.
hoping to see maybe 60, 70, or maybe 80 PGMP this year. Fingers
Well,
crossed.
yeah, it's good. I mean, the fact that your course, you know, of the certified PGMPs out there on the planet, well over 10% belong just to your course alone. And there are other providers. I mean, that kind of says something. So,
Yeah. No, thank you for trusting me in your PGMP journey and working with me or allowing me to work with you. That was a great privilege to go through this process, and seeing you becoming PGMP was even fantastic. All right. So thank you all for joining. I know it may be midnight or early morning for you, wherever you are. That shows the dedication. And this program happened to be very popular. I think we got above 100 registrations. That shows, Ren, your popularity. You have been seen as role model, and they like to hear from you today.
okay, well, hopefully I give them some good information, useful information.
Exactly, exactly. That's what the purpose is. So I have been bringing or inviting lots of leaders in the space, project manager, program manager, portfolio managers, even C-level people. They came here and shared the experience, and I'm sure today from Ren, we're going to hear something interesting and useful to all of you. So if you have not watched the previous videos, previous recordings, so all these are available on the YouTube channel. And probably 50 or 60 such people, the great people came and talked about it. So I'm very privileged, very honored to be part of the successes of your life as well as of so many people. It is so special for me that some people are trusting me and giving me opportunity to work and help them through the journey. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
Perfect. So then I have a few questions which I have discussed with you, and you have opportunity to see them. As well as we got some audience questions, we had opportunity to get few questions from them as well. So we like to cover them as many as we can. All right. So no further delay. I will start my questions, but before I like to, one thing I have shared a couple of links on chat. If you are into PgMP or PfMP, please watch those videos. This video, I shared information all about PgMP or PfMP. You're going to love that information. It's no selling there, nothing. It's just pure, what is the process, PgMP, what to do, application, this and that.
Okay, sure. I mean, I guess we'll start off with question number 1.
Yeah, of course. I will talk to you. I will ask the question. So today we talk about strategic objective challenges from the program manager's perspective. So what program manager sees the strategic objectives and what are the challenges and how we should be aligning ourselves, our project programs with the organization strategy objectives. So in line with that, my first question is, why is there a rise in the need for program managers to embrace the different practices? You have several practices available, different methodologies available. In the post-pandemic situation, we have seen the pandemic, we still coming out of pandemic, we cannot say 100% out, but we start seeing different practices available, different methodology available. So what do you think as a program manager?
Well, I think from a program manager's perspective, we have to look at sustainability of our programs. Certainly given changes in economic factors or politics or demographics, because we hear a lot about resources jumping ship, we have to try and focus on what it takes to keep our program sustainable. We have to make sure that our team's morale is maintained and that productivity is still kept at the levels that are acceptable both to our internal and external clients. So different methodologies give us certain advantages, whether it be waterfall, agile, safe agile, whether people want to apply thought process like Kanban or Six Sigma. I think as a program manager, because you have a breadth of experience and you're expected to have a larger breadth of experience, to maintain that sustainability, especially post-pandemic, you have to have a knowledge and the ability to kind of adapt. So I think that that's why you have to be able to embrace different practices. There's not one pat answer that is the key to success. So if you can kind of take the best practice or what works for you from each little bit to put together a productive team and achieve your objectives, then that's what you have to do. And I think for most program managers today, even project managers, that's what they do. It's not like they follow just one way of doing things. It can be labeled one way and everybody calls it agile, but at the end of the day, if you really looked at what people were doing, you would see that it's like waterfall on steroids, or maybe it's safe agile, or maybe it's Six Sigma following. So everything is constantly adaptive.
Exactly. Yeah. So again, it depends on the type of work we're doing, the complexity in the program. Sometimes it's good to use waterfall. Sometimes it's totally not useful to use the waterfall. Look at agile or different methodology, iterative, and whatever. So yeah, as a program manager, we need to see what methodology or what structure will work for my program. Sometimes it is organization driven that you have to use this, or sometimes your flexibility depending on the type of work.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think kind of key in this, and it was a very important chapter on the exam, was governance. You really have to have clear governance. Although a lot of companies have to do more with fewer resources, so there are Jacks and Janes of all trades. Everybody's got to wear a million hats. I think a strong governance model just helps out when things can get very chaotic. Certainly at the beginning, when things, your teams are per the Tuckman model, everything's storming and you're still trying to figure things out. Or even when you bring in new resources partway through a program And I don't know if anybody's read The Mythical Man Month, but you know, you have to bring people on board and you have to do it quickly. You can't just embrace one style. You have to be flexible to do what it takes to get to end of job, right? So
yeah, totally agree. Totally agree. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your experience on that. And yeah, thank you. And guys, as I mentioned, if you have any question, if you have follow-up question on that, please put your question on the question pad you have. I do have a question, but that's related to more PgMP and panel review. And we can talk about that. I will prefer to take this question a little later.
okay.
Okay. Yeah. Why do program manager need to understand local cultures, values, politics when involved in multinational strategic programs?
Yeah, well, I guess working at Hitachi Vantara does give me the advantage of working with global teams. And certainly in the world that we live today, there are definitely opportunities to have to address that type of question. Why, as a program manager, I particularly feel like I need to be aware of where various team members come from, what may be influencing how they react or do their work or produce what I need them to produce, is key, especially because you want to avoid unnecessary conflict between team members. You want to make sure that just because somebody comes from a certain country, that people don't come with a bias about it. You know, a lot of times we have, like I deal with American people, and in America it's go, 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 and you know, we'll kill ourselves, we're going to deliver on time, we're going to deliver, you know, everything is going to be perfect, and even when it's chaotic, everything's still going to be perfect. Whereas when I'm dealing with Europe, you know, depending on the country, you can only make so many demands of your resources, and even how they speak, you know, on calls, you want to make sure that you pick a language that everybody speaks, which, you know, for most part is English, but I have been on calls where people speak a different language that I happen to speak. So, you know, it facilitates the discussion that way. But, you know, just the accents, intonation, you know, and you have to make sure that somebody who's not as perhaps culturally aware, you know, isn't used to dealing with people from foreign countries, doesn't get offended just because they hear a very dry tone, or, you know, that they don't misinterpret somebody's political joke the wrong way just because that person, you know, doesn't live in a country that's threatened by war or you know, like they just don't have that background. So I find that it is key, you know, just to kind of make sure that my team can work together faster. And we appreciate the fact that although we're all different, you know, we're all there to deliver the same goal. Is that, yeah?
Yeah, no, definitely. You know, yes, yeah. In the current situation our current environment we're working in, we have teams from all over the world, and they are located there, those countries, or maybe they are working with you in your you know, locally as well. And they're coming from different background, of course, you know, the cultural background or their political background, or the way they interpret what you say, because that also depends upon their upbringing as well. So as part of the program management or interaction with them, so one of the responsibilities to ensure that they actually understand what you're saying. Not about the English, you know, it's not about only about the English. English is one of the, you know, thing which you have to use because we have to work with them, but also the way they interpret your questions or requirement or demand, and ask them, hey guys, have you understood this? Can you interpret? Can you tell me, you know, reply back to me on, you know, what is your understanding? So your job is to ensure that they understand what you're saying.
Yes.
You can't just assume that because of their saying yes, that they've understood. You have to make sure they understood.
Yes, and that's why sometimes I use different forms of documentation or different methods of documentation. Sometimes I might be very visual, just so I have a very varied audience, and not everybody's, you know, English may be a third or fourth language for many people. I find that a visual diagram and saying, okay, well, this is what I understand. And sometimes I'll throw myself like under the bus first in terms of, I'm not the technical expert. You're the people delivering this. I'm just there to shepherd you along the way and help you with what you need, which is kind of like a program manager is very much a servant leader in that respect. And so I may do something very visual, and then everybody starts putting their hand up, you know, because it's always hard to put the first sentence down on paper, but everybody's willing to edit, you know. So that I find helps a lot as well.
Fantastic, fantastic. And about the politics, when you have to deal with,
you know what, we've lived through very interesting times. You know, the previous presidency in the U.S., which led to a lot of conversations, and then currently what's happening, you know, between Ukraine and Russia, the concerns around China. I think for the most part, and I don't know whether it's, you know, the luck of the corporation that I happen to work for, but if I think about the hiring policies of most corporations, they do look for a type that fits their company. So it's very seldom that we will run into truly difficult political situations. Not to say that there isn't the odd time somebody does pull a bonehead move and make a really inappropriate comment, but then that's kind of rare. I mean, typically in politics, everybody just mostly wants to joke about it and talk about what they saw on Colbert, because they even look at Colbert on in Europe, or they'll talk about Jimmy Fallon or whatever. Yeah, so I mean, I've been fortunate that in this particular role in Hitachi Vantara, I guess enough people watch enough Netflix and Hulu that it's okay. In previous roles, politics never really came into play in terms of the grand scheme of things. It was always more internal politics. But you know, the rule of thumb is keep your head down, right? You know, until you're willing to become a political animal in your own company, it's not really worth throwing yourself out there.
Yeah. Exactly. So the only thing we can do, being aware what's happening in the organization, because you know many organizations it is like that. You know, people trying to climb on each other, or you know what I'm talking about. It's more about how can I see more than other person than they. But being aware, you know, that we have the culture. We need to be without becoming part of it. That's what
Yeah. I think as a program manager, though, too, if it comes to like some type of politics, personal politics, whatever, we as facilitators for the team, we can't treat everything like political correctness. You know, once again, you could go to the other side of the spectrum with political correctness, and then people just don't open up. So you have to make sure that, especially with global teams, that people are comfortable to express themselves. You know, it's not like everybody's in a room and you can literally physically see the person and kind of tap them. But you have to be prepared to call people out, get them to participate, or make them comfortable enough that they feel they can participate in a group or you know, with you.
Yeah, perfect. Then I have a question from audience, from Rajesh. Considering hybrid model adaptation for Agile, sometimes sprints delivery during the sprint delivery getting impact. Please share your view. So hybrid means partly here, partly working from home or other part of the world.
Yeah, I mean, I want to say that it's a bit of a challenge, I think, for anybody, because you have to, the key there to manage the sprints properly is not only to plan the sprint, but to plan where your bodies are. What is going on in the lives of the bodies that have to deliver on these sprints? You know, it's not, as much as we have all of technology, there's people behind the technology. We have to respect the fact that there are still people getting sick, whether it's with COVID or colds or allergies or whatever. We still have to respect the fact that not everybody wants to work from home, or they want to work from home part-time. So I find that when planning sprints, I literally start with the question of, okay, where does everybody see themselves physically over the next time span? Will they be on vacation? Do they have doctor's appointments? Do they have to take their kids to the doctors? Do they have to, you know, I mean, I'm fortunate that nobody finds it offensive if I want to find out, you know, do they have lives outside of the work? Because that can affect sprint timing, especially when I have teams that may be 6 hours ahead of where I am, or 3, or 3 hours behind me, or in the case of when I deal with folks from India, they're 10 hours ahead of me. Like we have to do the math. It's like 12 hours minus 2 ahead, like, you know, type of thing. Anyhow, so yeah, I mean, it's really important to remember the person that you have to work with when planning the sprint. Now, doesn't mean that things can't happen, but I think you also have to be reasonable and work with the team to have reasonable sprint goals. Sometimes people are like, oh, we have pressure and we have to deliver and we have this. And you really have to suss out, what are your constraints? What are your dependencies? I mean, beyond the resources, are there other projects? Are there other sprints? Are there, you know, is there something that's going to happen? Like in Canada 2 weeks ago, communications for half the country went down because one of our 2 main providers had a major outage. So people were dead in the water for over 24 hours. I think in some cases, people were still unable to use internet or cell phone service for 4 days. So anyhow, you know, I mean, these are things like, I find that as much as you can learn about Agile and how to plan a sprint, I think you have to take a greater look at the organic stuff that can impact your planning.
Yeah, perfect. I mean, you know, hybrid environment it's not new. Where, you know, if you are working IT, this is already there. You know, when I was working for a company called Westpac back in Australia, my half team was in India. You know, IBM team. So we used like cameras and, you know, special like a presentation, like a what do you call, screen, and they can see us directly on whatever we're writing here, and they when they're writing, we can also see the side. So, you know, sometimes you have to use different technology, which whatever works for you. So you should be thinking about, okay, if this technology does work, maybe we try other things. And yes, what you mentioned about COVID and the situation, the personal situation, we need to be aware of that. And yes, if these things do impact the program delivery or the sprint, but, you know, we are at the end of the day, we are people, or the human. We need to be aware the other side is also human. So they may be in some situation which may need some attention rather than your project or program.
Yeah, and that's where it's important as a program manager to have that level of trust, so that in a way people can help you anticipate an issue, like an issue or a risk or whatever, and then you can kind of pivot pretty quickly, right?
Exactly. Another question: being a program manager, how would you like to deal with your team members during worst and best situations?
Oh, you know what? I honestly, whether it's a bad, like, you know, the worst situation or the best situation, I even think that my boss would pretty much say that I'm pretty consistent. I really believe in open communication. I believe that you have to have a sense of humor. I honestly do, because at least in my role as a program manager, I don't have a dying person on a table in front of me and I have to save their life. So I have to give myself context. As much as people can feel the pressure, you kind of have to say to yourself, is somebody about to die in 5 minutes because they couldn't spend $5 on their Visa card? Like, you know, that type of thing. So it does take a bit of humor. I think in the worst situations, it's always good to speak with the individuals independently before you try to call them out in a group. If it is a particularly challenging situation, I myself will escalate, just because I don't want to alienate them any more than I think typically, and I have to think of like a bad situation that I was in. I don't want to alienate them any more than they've probably alienated themselves. So sometimes a situation can just start because a person's very stressed out, and then it just kind of balloons out and mushrooms out to impact everybody around them. So, you know, to kind of get the mushroom back into the box, or even just, you know, help them deal with it, is kind of key. But even in the best situation, I mean, it still is a sense of humor, because those high, like, you know, like for a lot of people, the highs can be very high and the lows can be very low. And you have to appreciate the fact that it will never be a straight line, you know. There's a French movie, and the title is basically Life is Not a Smooth River. And programs, projects, portfolios, nothing is a smooth river. So I think you have to accept that. There are people who are very much into they have to be perfect and everything has to be correct. And you have to acknowledge that, you know, when they feel stressed in a bad situation, yes, you know, like this is, don't beat yourself up. I think we all do that because we all want to bring the best of ourselves to our jobs. And in a great situation, it's easy. Everybody's in a high mood. But I think you have to remind people of those high moods when things aren't as high, you know. So it's, yeah, I would say that that would be my trick.
No, fantastic. You know, this, I mean, everybody has different way of dealing with the good or bad situation. But yeah, correct. Yeah, as you mentioned, if somebody is going through the, you know, program is going through a bad situation, or particular person going through a bad situation, it's good to have one-to-one conversation and understand the situation, maybe behind the bar, behind the rooms, and you know, if you have to bring it in front of everybody, you know, after the conversations, we've got a discussion before you talk to other people. Okay, great, thank you, and thanks for the question, guys. Appreciate that. My next question for you: what skill must a program manager learn to manage future program focus more on strategic objective and business value?
Because you know what, folks, full admission, that was, I was given these questions ahead of time, so I did a bit of thinking about it and studying. So for a program manager to manage future program focus, you know, I mean, the idea is although we're not portfolio managers that deliver on a specific strategy, I think we still have to have our focus on the strategic objectives. We may parse them out into smaller strategic objectives, but the whole key is that it really generates better measurements for performance, better, you know, I think ultimately you have to be able to measure. There's got to be a way to discover the metrics, and the right metrics, not just any metric. You know, it's got to be metrics that are meaningful so that if it changes, you're able to kind of pivot quickly and say, oh, you know what, we're not going in the right direction now. There are traditional ways of measuring things, you know, by number of hours and, you know, percentage complete. But ultimately, I think, you know, better metrics, like in a post-pandemic world, given virtual teams and all the work and the leveraging of technology, some of the traditional measurements I don't think are valid anymore. There used to be, you know, the adage about when you went into the office, everybody watched who left the office first, you know. Now it doesn't matter. It's more, when did you deliver your goal? Did you deliver your goal on the negotiated date? Did you, you know, did we have to push it out? Why did it get pushed out? Were you able to anticipate why it got pushed out? So there's metrics, a different way of thinking about things to focus on strategic objectives and business value for the future. I think, well, in Canada, I don't know how far along we are. I mean, you know, it's one of those things that you can be aware of it and you try to bring it to your program. Whether it fits in with your company's overall enterprise PMO, maybe it's something that you bring up as a topic. But there's also this idea, you know, to try and manage, you know, managing these programs that in the future you say to yourself, okay, well, there's a bit more risk than traditionally involved. What if there's another pandemic? What if the war escalates? What if there's a shortage? What about climate things, you know, like big tsunamis wiping out deliverable areas, because Southeast Asia is still a key provider. I mean, how many of us go out to try and buy something with supply chain issues, right? Because, you know, it's not available, supply chain issues. So I think one of the things that comes up is defining value. Like at every time in your program, you have to be proving to your customer or whoever that you're providing value. So once again, kind of going back to the measurements, when you think about what your exit criteria are for a sprint or your exit criteria are for a phase gate, it's what is the value of that criteria? Does that value help you anticipate what's going to come next? Or is it stuck in the tradition so that if something happens, you can't pivot fast enough? So that would be my answer to that. Fantastic, good, thank you.
Very, very, very good answer. Thank you. I have a question, another question. I think this is more generic question, but let me ask. For interview preparation, okay.
Oh.
For top 10 IT companies, what's your strategic aspect to crack the interview? Like 7-8 rounds generally, there are 7-8 rounds. If you have a review on that.
I've never been through a 7 or 8 round interview. I think the most I did was for a government role, and there was 4. And there was like a written exam. It was a very weird interview. I had never had to write an exam for an interview. I think that to crack any interview, you have to be authentic.
Yeah.
Honestly, like whether, authentic is to who you are as a person, and how you would interact with people. You can't put on up front because it kind of becomes unnatural about probably halfway through. Certainly interviews that last an hour or 2 hours, which I've had, you can't maintain a front for the whole thing. As well, in terms of as a program manager for the top 10 IT companies, I would say you have to show a legitimate knowledge of the company or of the area that you're being interviewed for. Like, you don't have to be this subject matter expert on how to code, cloud scale, right? But you do have to be able to work with somebody who codes cloud scale. And when they start talking to you, you're able to help them get through their obstacles or understand how you want to report what they're telling you, or be able to flag what they're telling you. Like maybe they don't think it's an issue, but you can identify the issue coming down the pipeline. So I think as a program manager, you kind of have to show that wearing the multiple hats, but the fact that you're probably more people focused than you would have been had you started off as a coder in the beginning, right? I also think, once again, sense of humor helps, huge. You got to show that you're human. I mean, a lot of companies now talk about trying the work-life balance and recognizing people for having a value, meaningful work, so, bring up how you can bring your own meaning to your role, and that, you're expecting from your employer to support. You're looking for me, it's not that you're totally looking for meaning, but that you are trying to provide meaningful work, and you're expecting support from your employer that, yes, your work will be valued, your presence is valued. It is key for you to be with us, part of our team. So I would say that those would be my tips.
Yeah, definitely. Being authentic and, giving the example, right example. They will be asking some situational question. What do you do in this situation? What do you have, politically, or some stakeholder with demanding something. So think about some real or hypothetical situation which you can relate easily, and try to be as authentic as you can. What happened in that situation, and what you do, what makes you. Basically, they're looking for a person who can, who is not just technically excellent. They're looking for fit in the organization, best fit in the organization. Also, can they get work done as a program manager, working with the coder or testers and some infrastructure people. You may not know all the things, but you're ready to learn and work with those people. And I personally gone through a situation where I have no idea what they're talking about initially. There's a cloud data center, but I'm asking them, hey guys, that's a post interview, by the way. But the interviewers, I'd like to see, yes, you may not have no knowledge, but you're willing to learn, and how fast you're ready to learn it.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Plus, I've always found that the rule of thumb is whatever job you've interviewed for, the day you walk in, it's not the same job.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yep, perfect. Yeah, good. Thank you. While it was a little bit out, but I think, and not only Rajesh, but other people also got the benefit out of this. And thank you. This is good. Maybe we can have another session where we can talk about how to get into the job.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So let me get into my next question: how to confront uncertainty? Because we are going through, and you talked about many uncertainties.
Oh yeah. So yeah, the question was about how to confront uncertainty in an organizational strategy, because future is becoming difficult to predict. So, you know, there's always the standard, you know, everybody's knee-jerk reaction is using SWOT, and always looking at strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. If you remember it, if you've studied it, if you've written the exam. The other option is everybody looks at black and white, kind of, you know, it's a binary. Is this going to happen or is this not going to happen? I'm pretty sure 5 years ago, people talked about, oh, you know, a pandemic happening, and in their minds, it was 20, 30 years out. It wasn't 3 years out. So I think that where organizations could improve, and as program managers, part of our benefit, and this is kind of, I mean, for me, it's a relatively recent kind of field for me to start delving into, this kind of futurist thinking. It's not that I haven't been futurist thinking, but like to actually, you know, kind of apply it to my job and kind of say, okay, as a program, you know, that's going to be X number of years versus projects, you know, that we kind of evolved from. It's this idea that you have the traditional view, like, you know, this is close enough. Yeah, I think this is going to happen. And I'm really only looking at a single strategic objective and a single direction. Like, this is my company's policy and this is what we're going to do. But then after that, you know, you start looking, and for me, I start looking at the ranges of what could happen, right? So it's kind of like you start looking at probability. Now, it can be to my advantage that I really did a lot of work with banks before I joined Hitachi Vantara. So a lot of looking at discrete scenarios to help predict the future, because of the regulatory obligations that we have. So, you know, like you look at what the politicians are going on about and what they're going to bring in for laws. And, you know, banks start talking about them right away, right? So, and Canada in particular is very regulated. So for us, it's kind of more intrinsic for us to start looking at alternate futures, depending on something, but usually it's driven by a legislative mandate. So I kind of blend those two together, like, or traditionally I would blend those two together. What's newer for me is looking kind of at ranges. Like now I'm kind of saying, well, what's the chance, like what's the probability of something? And, you know, kind of saying, is this future, like I'll speak once again, like I always leverage my managers, like, you know, my bosses, and we'll have conversations, and I'll leverage it with my peers where we'll say, you know, what's the chance of this happening? 10%, 20%, you know, 80-20 rule, whatever. And that is where I think it helps you deal with that uncertainty. Capturing that type of information, you know, where you kind of start saying, okay, there's a 10% chance. Okay, you start documenting that risk, and it helps you develop the ability, like the risk mitigation plan or risk response that you need to develop, so that you can pivot should it happen, right? Then after that, you know, it always comes down to, you know what you know, and you know that you don't know everything, right? So there's always that thing that, you know, aliens may come down one day, and who knows what that's going to do to everybody's program. But, you know, like, and I'm on projects or programs, and, you know, it's the comment that I'll throw out there because people will be like, we have it all covered. And it's like, well, yeah, but what if aliens land? Okay, so now what? Many, many years ago, I was on a project, and one guy, he really got me to think about that type of ambiguity, because we were talking about bank branches, and he said, well, what if somebody opens a window in a snowstorm? Because in Canada, we do get snowstorms, especially in the center of Canada, around Manitoba and Saskatchewan. And we all looked at the guy like, what? Who the hell opens a window in the middle of a snowstorm? He said, well, what if it happens? We actually had to put it down as a risk, and we had to investigate what happened. We did find out that 5% of the branches had windows that could open, which in actual fact was against bank policy because of security issues. You're not supposed to have any windows that can open. So, you know, you find things out. But I mean, sometimes you have to ask, where's the alien, right? And I think that kind of really more the ranges of futures, like, kind of where, are you going really over the deep end, or, could it happen? And if it's a greater than, I don't know, these days, I would say if it's a greater than 15% chance, you better have a risk response strategy ready.
Exactly. And look, there are some uncertainties we can guess or anticipate. Something happened in past, let's say talk about snowstorm, something, yes, it's a regular feature in Canada. But if you're talking Kenya or Ghana or some other places, having snowstorm there is very, very rare. I don't think anybody has seen. I may be wrong, totally wrong on this. But I'm just saying, if nobody has seen any snowstorm in Ghana, then they will not plan for that. They don't care about, hey, I don't care, window open, close. But yes, bank policy. The bank policy, you're not allowed to have a window which can open, but that can. So that's one type of uncertainty. But some of the uncertainty, which, as you say, if aliens do land on the earth, then they come with something which we don't know. So these uncertainty, we cannot do anything with them, because if that happen, we need to deal with that, or we may have to use our management reserve. We talked about management reserve, contingency reserve. So I don't know what management reserve we can have for this kind of situation, what you're talking about. But we look at some unknowns happen. What can we do, Mr. Boss or top boss? Can you have resources or some money which we can utilize for this purpose? They may say, we have something in the management reserve which we can allocate for your project or your program. And but you have to go through the change control process, make sure you document it in why and why not.
Yeah, one of the big challenges you mentioned about, leveraging the management reserve or the contingency reserve. As much as we have these reserves, I work for a vendor now, as opposed to being on the client side before. So those reserves are actually kind of theoretical. Like, it's really not in our interest to have to touch those reserves, right? We should be working with our baseline budgets. So it's this idea of being able to, like, once again, I think the key for a lot of corporations to kind of future-proof themselves is to create a quicker pivot should something happen, that they can respond to it. Many customers that we had, government agencies, banks, or whatever, suddenly discovered at the start of the pandemic, how many people did they not give laptops to? So people were stuck. They couldn't do their work. They were on desktops. And then you had to move the desktops home. Well, how many people dropped their desktop or dropped their monitors, or, had a backache and, couldn't move it, and then you had to arrange for movers. So, it's this idea that, it can be a very fun session. So as a program manager, I would say to you, it can be a lot of fun when you have to figure out risks, because you literally go through the gamut. Some can be really silly, but at the end of the day, a lot of these companies who may have thought it was really silly about having all their employees work from home suddenly found themselves spending millions of dollars on laptops and movers and ergonomic chairs for home and what have you, because otherwise they didn't have people to do the jobs.
Yeah, they have to do that. Yeah. Okay, great stuff. Thank you very much. Very nice. I think it's a good discussion. Thank you. Okay, so what is your advice to someone new in project program management when trying to implement processes and tools that not many people have used them in past? So if, for example, if you're implementing new software, thing which nobody has used in past as a program manager, what's your advice for that?
It's an uphill battle, first off.
Yeah.
I would say that if you're really gung-ho on the use of this tool, you better be, the evangelist for the tool. Be prepared for that. I think you also have to look at proving it on a small scale.
Yeah.
If you're having challenges with buy-in from senior management, just because it may represent another expense. It also helps, within your peer group, just to find out if anybody has heard of anybody using a similar type of tool, or a tool that is meant to do what you're trying to accomplish with the one that you're trying to introduce. You want to be 100% sure that nobody is using something that you would be competing with. I've been through it. I'm going through it. So, it's one of those things where you're really trying. I don't want to say it's Sisyphus rolling the rock up and down the hill, but you are moving a big boulder in some cases. Certainly the larger the corporation, the bigger the challenge it is. If you can get your team to work on the new tool to prove, like, it's kind of like you basically indoctrinate the others so that they go out and spread the word and say, hey, on this program, we use this tool and it was so much easier. You know what I mean? Get that influence out. I would probably recommend those types of moves to start it going. Will you run into challenges? Probably, because they're always traditionalists and it's like, why are you changing things? And if it's not broke, why change it? But at the end of the day, if it's a tool that helps you and your team do your jobs more effectively, then throw yourself at it, but be prepared that, it's an uphill climb.
Exactly. I mean, yeah, you very well, but I think if you do like the particular tool and you really appreciate that, and of course you need to talk to management, but before you do that, make sure you really understand it and the complexity, how easy it is, and the security point of view. You may like to implement, but there may be some other challenges, security problems, or database or whatever. And if you do decide, okay, have a demo, and second thing is, okay, start in a small group. And you mentioned, having 5-6 people started, and you start liking it, grow it before you go to the enterprise level, and get the best point out of that, and the worst thing, and what are the things we have to be careful about. Involve your IT team as early as possible. And if this all working well, why not? Of course, you need to go through your procurement team, and especially if you're dealing with a larger organization, that can be a big challenge.
Yeah. Well, you can discover that there's other teams that have also experienced the same problem, but then they picked another tool. So now you got to go. You got to look at best of breed, right?
Yeah. I'm telling you from my experience, not from the implementing point of view, but we have the tool built along with my team at Bangalore. We call VxDCC, and that's where we, when we are talking to people, hey guys, this is one of the best tools which is going to integrate all the information you need in one place, and program portfolio, all kind of thing. But before you apply or go through the full implementation, make sure you follow these steps. So we don't want to get into the risk, and later on you realize something we should have avoided earlier. But we give you opportunity of that. Okay, start with a small, do a demo, bring your pain point, and let's start with you or maybe 5 or 6 people, and then grow. That's I think best approach to get into that. Okay. Yeah, if anybody like to know more about, I can talk more about that at later stage, one-to-one or something. All right, my next question for you is, do you think going through and achieving PgMP certification has made you more effective program manager?
Yeah, absolutely. Why wouldn't it? I think that whether I'm a program manager, project manager, portfolio manager, whatever the role, the corporation that I work for has certain way of doing things, or I have natural habits, based on what's worked for me in the past. And by studying, it either gives me those aha moments or helps me consolidate that what I'm doing is the right way of doing it. With the PgMP, I think it just made me more effective in trying to communicate with the various teams. Whereas I think in the past, I probably would have said, well, this, I've said this, or I've done it a certain way. I think studying for the PgMP just kind of helped remind me of certain best practices that I should be adhering to. Making sure about stuff in writing, or how to be a succinct communicator. And also the idea that I can't be, I'm sure everybody can tell, I'm not the most formal conservative person out there. But there are times where I do have to kind of put my foot down, and people have to understand that I do mean what I say. They can't just sit there and say, "Oh, Ren, you're pretty easy to get along with. We'll be fine." And so yeah, that helped me. The other one was key. That was the whole roadmap thing, because we create roadmaps, and in many companies, I don't know for the audience, you create the roadmap at the beginning, And then it just kind of becomes this reference point that you look at the odd time. You don't go back and edit it, which I know, like in the PgMP, you know, you're supposed to revise it and revisit it and what have you. But it's not in practice done that way, right? Everybody just kind of sees it and goes, oh, that's a really great picture. And it's like, oh, you know, and then by the time you get to the end of the program, you're like, oh, didn't that change? Did we get rid of that? What happened there? You know, and then you have to do all the backlog and look back and say, when was that decision made? And, oh, you know, so keeping the roadmap up to date was a good best practice that I was reminded of by getting my PgMP. Otherwise, getting the certification, certainly I don't know, it felt good for me. You know, like I know that it's a limited audience at this point who have it, as opposed to like the PMP. But it's kind of nice to be in an elite group, you know? Not that I want to be a snob and special all the time, but I guess I am one of those people that intellectually it's like, yeah, I knew I could do it, and I feel glad that I did it. You know, it was kind of a checkbox for me, career-wise.
And any change happens from a career point of view because you got PgMP now, or you see that potential?
Yeah, it's definitely opened other doors that I didn't think about. So as a true product manager, not like an agile product manager, but like, you know, just like as a product manager, where you manage the development and the release of a project into a market, product into a market, which I was not aware of as being something that I could look at as a possibility. The other one is I've been involved in some business side deals, like more with sales, kind of working on opportunities. And I've always done them in a certain way, but with the studying of the PgMP and achieving the certification, so it really got ingrained, I realized that there was a different approach that I could take to this type of opportunity work. Not being a strong salesperson, because it's not my forte. However, it's not that far out of my reach to work on these kind of pre-engagement developments.
Perfect. Yeah. So definitely, you know, it opens up lots of doors. And given that it's only a few people have the certificate, and you know, when your hiring manager or your senior managers realize that, hey, this person gone through a training program and she understands a little bit more than I know, she can help us and to refine our processes, to refine our way of thinking, and that's where they give you special attention. Okay, why don't you join us in PMO group, or why don't you join us in this group or that group? So you know, I've seen this happening. You've seen yourself. I've seen this with many people.
Yeah.
With so many people getting certificate, they get headhunted. Actually, one of the lady, she was on my webinar, and before webinar, she told me, look, Dharam, I got headhunted by another bank, and I have been offered 200% salary than what I was having. I think 100% or 200%, something like this.
Yeah.
I never thought of that. I never even thought of applying such bank. But there you go. They are offering me a job, and they're already offering me the salary, which is beyond my imagination. Wow, why not?
Yeah.
So these things happen, you know, just because you have taken an extra step, you came out of comfort zone and learn to become better program manager, and you earn your certificate, and there you go. That's where it is.
Yeah, certainly there is a wider view of opportunities that I wasn't aware of.
Exactly.
Until I got it.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. And thank you for trusting me on the journey, which makes me feel special to be part of your journey.
Well, it was an easy one.
Easy choice. I know we are almost time, but I do have a few audience questions, if you permit me, Ren, and if you guys want to stay. I like to ask this question. If you know, how do you manage the leadership who thinks and works as a project manager and agile, where they think that project management and agile are two different things, two different topics? What do you think?
Yeah, so I did look at that, and you know, it's educating your management, right? The whole idea is that, and it also depends on the type of agile that they're introducing, because Safe Agile brought in the terminology of that release train engineer, because they use the whole train concept like Japan Rail. I would say that it really is a question of education and proving that as a program manager, you know, of multiple Agile initiatives, you are the Scrum Master of the Scrum Masters. Whatever the thing, you know, they want to use as a nomenclature. But you have to, I think you just have to demonstrate that even under Agile, the program manager's role is within the Agile umbrella. In terms of, you know, like one of the things I would have said probably the easiest is just checking with your sponsor or the management about safe Agile, and, you know, just trying to educate them on that. Maybe even suggesting lunch and learns for people so that the team can become aware of what Agile is. And that's that.
Exactly.
Right.
And then I think that's also in line with the other question I have is best practice to balance between safe and program management.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. And I mean, the fact that they want to try and keep Agile and program management separately shows that they probably are on the side of Agile is waterfall, just faster.
Yeah.
Right.
And by the way, program management is not just waterfall, it is applied to waterfall as well as the agile environment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, PMI is not talking about the type of methodology you can use for managing the project. It can be totally agile, it can be hybrid, it can be totally waterfall, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
As a program manager, you're managing multiple interdependent components.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's why it is the differences. All right, quickly, how to identify the required skills for assessing virtual team in different cultural settings?
Yeah, I wasn't quite sure about that question, and this will have to be my last question. Sorry. But it's a question of, you know, are you assessing them from a job description role? Like, you know, just how are they doing? Because honestly, it would just be a question of micro deliverables. How are they delivering on what you're asking? Is there a lot of reticence in the deliverable? Is there a lot of hesitation? Do you need to push them? So I would say typically, if I'm certainly not familiar with the team, I'm going to ask for smaller deliverables and just see how they respond to that.
Yeah, okay. Perfect. All right, that's good. And one last question, I can also answer that. Okay. What are the questions we are getting in panel interview? So for the PgMP certification, I can answer that one for you for that. So panel review, the questions, you know, there are all set questions. Everybody have visibility to this question before we start filling the application. So they do give you two options, A, option B. So pick the best option where you feel you're more comfortable with and write as best as possible about that particular choice you have. So these questions are already known to you and they will be as part of the application. Okay. Yeah. And panel review is very, very important, whether you're talking PgMP or PfMP, because this is where you're going to explain your role as a program manager. What did you do in that particular domain when you're writing those, you know, think about the situation, think about the example and so on. Okay. Thank you, Ren. It was really, really exciting, or a lot of learning happened in this 1 hour. And
well, thanks a lot for the opportunity, Dharam.
Yeah, and I'm also getting lots of appreciation from a lot of people about the way you presented yourself, the way you talked about various situations, the skills, and many of the things. So it is great, and I'm very happy that I invited you and you fulfilled the expectation beyond my expectation.
I got my PDU.
Yeah. You got your PDU. Perfect. So thank you very much, Ren, and thank you all of you for joining today. It was wonderful to have you here and again. So please come back again to learn from people like Ren, and you know, who knows what else coming to you. And once again, appreciation, lots of appreciation, Ren, and I'm getting, as I said, I'm getting lots of appreciation on the question pad. People writing, it was fabulous, excellent, and thank you.
Thanks so much. Have a good one.